Literally the morning of my last day on Get Up, as Greenie was giving me a heartfelt goodbye and I awkwardly sat there, as I was leaving the set, they started a promo that Stephen A. Smith will be on the show tomorrow. Like, it is him. So let's stop acting like the guy gets worked to death. It's him.
The breaking news hit the internet like a thunderbolt, and the sports world didn't even have time to blink. Before the shockwaves reached every corner of social media, Stephen A. Smith, the loudest voice at ESPN, the self-proclaimed face of the network, the man who built an empire on catchphrases, controversy, and charisma, was suddenly, unexpectedly removed from NBA Countdown. And the moment those words appeared in the New York Post, a tremor ran through basketball fans, journalists, Twitter timelines, and barbershop debates everywhere. Because if Stephen A. Smith could be replaced, then absolutely nobody at ESPN was safe. The New York Post headline was clinical but cold: Stephen A. Smith off NBA Countdown. No emotions, no celebration, no explanation. Just a clean cut, like someone quietly crossing his name off a list. And the article went further. It didn't just say Stephen A. Smith was off the show. It listed the new faces. Malika Andrews stepping in as a confident, fresh host. Brian Windhorst, the veteran analyst with insider connections. Kendrick Perkins, always loud, always passionate. Michael Malone, fresh off a championship run. Shams Charania, still dropping bombs as the NBA's breaking news machine. And in the middle of these rising and respected names, Stephen A. Smith was nowhere to be found. Fans looked at that lineup and said what everyone was thinking: yo, ESPN is moving on, and the timing made everything messier. Just days earlier, Michelle Beadle had resurfaced with her now viral story about how ESPN pretended to give her a heartfelt goodbye, only to replace her with Stephen A. Smith behind the scenes. She described how Mike Greenberg was on air giving her this warm farewell as she awkwardly smiled, while ESPN rolled a promo the same moment announcing that Stephen A. Smith would be taking her spot. So now, people were whispering the same thing: is Stephen A. Smith getting the same treatment he once benefited from? That's when Stephen A. Smith went live, and that's where everything got even worse. Stephen A. Smith stared into the camera like a man who had been waiting to fire back. He said he saw the New York Post article, that he knew people were talking, and he was confused. "I'm trying to figure out what the news is here," he said. He repeated it again, almost like he needed to convince himself. He explained how his contract negotiation, from June to April, included his decision to step away from NBA Countdown. He said he loved the show but didn't want to be in the studio until midnight. He said he had new projects, new responsibilities, new shows: his SiriusXM show, his political show on POTUS Radio, his production company, his scripted and unscripted projects, his game shows, his entire empire. He kept listing and listing and listing like a man trying to show the world he was not falling, not fading, not being replaced. Like a man trying to prove that his plate was too full for NBA Countdown. Not that NBA Countdown no longer needed him. But the problem is this: when someone truly isn't worried, they don't respond to every little rumor. And Stephen A. Smith responded immediately, loudly, aggressively. He insisted he negotiated this. He insisted it was his choice. He insisted it wasn't a demotion. He insisted he wasn't being pushed out. But every time he said it, it sounded less like confidence and more like a man trying to hold onto a narrative, slipping through his fingers, because the truth is, if ESPN wanted him to stay, the article would have said so. Just like it mentioned that Shams Charania would continue appearing. Just like it praised the new lineup. Just like it highlighted the rising faces. But Stephen A. Smith? Not a single mention of continued appearances. Not a single reassurance. Not a single confirmation, and that silence said everything. The YouTube narrator inside your original script picked up on this too. He said Stephen A. was on a high horse, fighting with Gemily Hell, arguing with critics online, acting like the king of ESPN, while maybe, quietly behind the scenes, the network was slowly shifting away from him. Pat McAfee, he pointed out, has a different kind of power, one that ESPN seems to value more right now. And that's the tension: Stephen A. Smith versus ESPN ego versus reality star versus the machine. And right now, it looks like the machine is winning. The fallout from Stephen A. Smith's live response didn't calm anything, it exploded the conversation. Because instead of reassuring fans, Stephen A. made every red flag brighter, every doubt louder, and every rumor heavier. The more he spoke, the more people wondered whether this removal wasn't his choice at all, but a carefully orchestrated move by ESPN to reduce his presence, lower his influence, and begin the slow, quiet process of replacing their biggest, loudest, most polarizing star. And the narrator in the script saw it instantly. He said Stephen A. Smith was losing his draw, losing his power, losing the thing that made ESPN revolve around him. That kind of language stings, because it hits directly at Stephen A.'s biggest fear, becoming irrelevant for years. Stephen A. Smith has been the face of ESPN, the man whose voice echoed across First Take, NBA Countdown, SportsCenter, our ADIO shows, interviews, commercials, podcasts, and everything in between. But lately, it's been different. The sports world has changed. ESPN has shifted. Ratings have fluctuated. New stars have emerged. And the network has made big, controversial changes like investing heavily in Pat McAfee, reshuffling shows, cutting major contracts, and reassessing which personalities still hold real audience power. And then there's the Michelle Beadle parallel moment the narrator purposefully resurfaced to show how ESPN operates. The clip felt like a warning. Stephen A. might not care for Michelle Beadle, but the pattern is undeniable. ESPN smiles at you on air, while replacing you off air. Which raises a question the narrator hammered home: if Stephen A. Smith wasn't being pushed out, why did he feel the need to respond so urgently? Because when someone tries so hard to control a narrative, the cracks start to show. Stephen A. said the deal to leave Countdown was negotiated last year. He said he didn't want to stay in the studio until midnight. He said he had too much work. But the narrator pointed out something brutal. If Stephen A. was still the #1 face of the network, the article would have reflected that. They would have said he will still appear occasionally, just like they did for Shams. But ESPN didn't say that. They simply moved on. The narrator went deeper. He questioned why Stephen A. argues with people online, why he responds to every critic, why he goes back and forth with Gemma Hill instead of focusing on his empire. He suggested that Stephen A. is acting like someone trying to prove they still have relevance, still have dominance, still have the crown. And to ESPN, that behavior is bad business. Because networks don't like headaches. Networks don't like controversy unless it benefits them. Networks especially don't like stars who believe they are bigger than the brand. And Stephen A. has said many times that he's bigger than the brand. But now, the brand might be reminding him who really has the power. ESPN has always been a machine, cold, calculated, strategic. They don't protect your legacy. They protect theirs. And right now, ESPN is restructuring, rebuilding, repositioning its identity. When the narrator said, Stephen A. isn't bigger than the program, it wasn't an insult, it was a reality check, because at some point, ESPN is going to ask itself, is Stephen A. still worth the price? And if they ever decide the answer is no, Stephen A. Smith will find himself in the exact same position Michelle Beadle was once in, smiling on camera while the network moves pieces behind the scenes. And here's where the script's tension peaks. Stephen A. claims he's still part of the ESPN family. Stephen A. claims he can still appear on Countdown if they need him. Stephen A. claims his contract still allows for occasional appearances. Stephen A. claims he has other shows, other deals, other projects. But none of that changes one brutal fact: he was removed from Countdown, not reassigned, not repositioned, not shuffled, removed. And maybe it wasn't personal. Maybe it wasn't political. Maybe it wasn't intentional. Maybe it was. But the bigger truth is that ESPN has already started shifting toward a new era, a new lineup, a new vision. And Stephen A. Smith isn't the center of it anymore. The narrator summed it up harshly. Stephen A. is acting like a man who sees a decline coming and is trying desperately to pretend he doesn't, which sets up the real cliffhanger. Is this the beginning of Stephen A. Smith's fall at ESPN? Or is this just a bump in the road for the loudest voice in sports media? Only the next headline will tell. Sports media. Only the next headline will tell.